You know, it's quite interesting. We did the budget. Nigel and I did a lot of stuff on the budget. We did some radio and some TV. And we got the normal sort of sneering result from Nick Robinson, the BBC pundit, who was sitting around the table with other people who also knew absolutely nothing about economics. And we pretty well much made the same point, that we are spending far too much money, and this is really the problem. And he accused us of armchair economics. Well, I would sooner have my economics from an armchair than Planet Zog, which is where they get theirs from. So let me run a few things past you, which I think is quite interesting. We talk about austerity budgets. We've heard about austerity budgets. One thing that we haven't had, ladies and gentlemen, is it, and that's austerity budgets. This government is still spending, on average, 10%, is adding to the national debt by 10% every year. And when this coalition government comes to be thrown out of office, and they will in 2015, the national debt will be 50% odd higher than when they took office. So he has done absolutely nothing to reduce the national debt. And poor Osborne, who's obviously a nice enough chap to go shooting with, but doesn't appear to have a brain, he thinks that if you cut your national annual deficit by 25%, you're going to dig yourself out of the hole. That just means, of course, you're spending 75% more money than you ought to be. If you, any schoolboy with a pocket calculator can point that out to him. If you want to reduce the annual deficit, you have to decrease the deficit by 125%, not 25%. So I'm not quite sure what he was doing at prep school, but I suspect he wasn't paying attention. And then, journalists from The Independent, The Guardian and the BBC have the immortal crust to say that we haven't costed our policies. Well, this is blasted impertinence as far as I'm concerned. I've been a professional financial economist all my life, and I can tell them how they could cut, how they could immediately cut some significant spending commitments. First of all, we know that they spend £1 billion a month on fake charities. Now, if you don't know about it, Google up fake charities. Or for the older Ukip members, get your grandchildren to Google up fake charities. And you'll find there are hundreds of charities which are funded by the government, and they have to show their accounts. They're registered charities, but they're not really, they're political lobbyists. I'm not talking about greyhounds, I'm not talking about the Donkey Sanctuary, I'm not talking about the National Lifeboat Institution. These are fake, bogus charities, £1 billion a month. That would go, if I had my way, straight away, Mr. Osborne. That's where you could save £1 billion. We also know, do we not, that there's £50 billion a year goes in quangos, and in 2011 we produced a policy, an excellent policy, which actually listed the quangos that we could get rid of. There are pages and pages and pages of them, none of which I've heard of, but they're all damn suspicious as far as I'm concerned, and I'd send them down the road with their fat cat salaries and their pensions as well. Down they go, £50 billion a year. And then we've got another interesting one, haven't we? International aid. International aid, which is blown away as 0.7%. 0.7% of GDP. And that doesn't sound very much, does it? Well, Mr. Osborne, what is your estimated growth for 2014? 0.8%. So you're going to give away round about 100% of any growth we make this year. You're going to send abroad to countries like Argentina, India, China even, and to states in Africa where it goes straight into Mercedes-Benz, Ray-Ban dark glasses and apartments in Paris. Well, we have old age pensions on 100 quid a week. It's got to stop. And that, of course, is another £1 billion. I wouldn't insult this audience by talking about the £50 million a day that we send to the European Union, because you already know that. So just hope, you know, Polly Toynbee is watching this clip, she would learn so much. So there we have it. There's about £80 billion worth of saving that we can make at a stroke. So our policies are costed, and if you notice, I haven't had to sack a single nurse, soldier, policeman, or anybody else. Anybody else? Save a few bob by sacking Nick Robinson, but that's neither here nor there. Now, I just want to it's 4 o'clock, gone 4 o'clock, you must be thinking about the cocktail hour, I know I am. And I don't want you to have to sort of test your brains too much at this stage of the day. A lot of you have come an awful long way. But I do want you to think about what I've got to say now, not necessarily to come up with an idea in your head today, but maybe if you think about it for the next week. And it's about taxation and how we handle taxation. Now, we've been right in Ukip. The reason that we are doing so well, is because we have been so consistently right for so long. We were right about energy policy, we were right about the euro, we were right about the EU, we have been right about crime, we have been right time and time again. And believe me, when I was sitting down on television programs and radio programs questioning the concept of apocryphal CO2, man-made global warming and all the rest of the bullshit that goes with that, I was getting a very hard time. So we had to be bold. We had to be bold. And we have always been bold. And I would ask you to support my idea, and I've been in contact with a number of you who take an interest in this, and I know you don't all necessarily agree, but I'd like you to think about the concept of flat tax. One of the problems that the Chancellor had, and he spoke at length about it when he was giving his speech, was tax evasion and tax avoidance. Bless his cotton sock, he doesn't actually know the difference, but he was talking about both of them. Avoidance and evasion. Now, the reason people evade or avoid tax, particularly avoid tax legally, because they're perfectly entitled to do so, is that tax is too high. It's just too high. If you're earning more than £100,000 a year, and that means in the private sector, it means you're giving up nearly 50% of your earnings, it's worth getting a fancy accountant to get you paid somewhere else. If it was something more sensible like 25%, most people would say, I don't mind paying 25%. 25% is reasonably fair. I don't mind paying my whack, but I'm not having the government steal 50% of my money in and around that figure and above. So I believe that we ought to have a flat tax, and those people who earn more will contribute more. So somebody on £113,000 a year is going to pay something like £25,000 in income tax, and somebody on the national average wage is going to pay something like about £4,000. And I regard that as being fair. And it sends a message to the world to say we believe in success, we reward success, we think success is not something to be ashamed about. Let's get away from taxation of envy. Let's get back to a taxation which is evidence-based. And the paradox is, of course, it would raise more money. Because if you look at the Calvin Coolidge administration of the 1920s, for a short time the Reagan administration, and the Coolidge administration, you know, there was a tax of 65% on incomes over $300,000 a year. Calvin Coolidge moved that back to 10%. He absolutely slashed it, and the tax take was exactly the same. And for those of you, and I know many of you are accountants and have knowledge of financial services, it's a good old-fashioned Laffer curve. It's sort of A-level economics. You bring down the tax rate actually goes up. Even governments acknowledged when they were doing the 45% tax, the government acknowledged it didn't raise any money, but it made people who feel jealous of people earning more money more comfortable. That is not the way to run a tax program, that is not the way to run a country. We've got to get back to rewarding success. Remember, income tax was invented to fight the Napoleonic Wars years and years ago. It was only a few pence and it was going to be temporary. It wasn't an idea to rip you off and to rip your families off for hard-working people who want to get ahead and want to earn more. And unlike the Conservatives, and Janice Actors made this point earlier and made it very well, I believe there should be a tax-free threshold of £13,000 a year, which is broadly in line with somebody who works hard on the average wage during the year. So I would make that £13,000 a year, which is in line, if you talk about our pound costing from years ago when we said it was 10, we were the first political party to say that it was 10, so that's actually in line. 13,000 is about 10 from a few years ago. Let's also look at a different way of judging inflation. A loaf of bread has doubled in price in the last 10 years. So is a pack of butter. Let's get some of the inflation systems, the CPI, the RPI, let's get those adjusted to what real people have to experience. Your shopping basket and things like that. That's what we need to do. Because the system we have now simply isn't working. So I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, if you could, is to support these ideas. Flat tax, interchangeable, of course, between wives and husbands. So we believe in Ukip, and it's been said earlier, we believe that the spouse who stays at home to bring up the family is equally valuable to society as the one that goes to work.